What up, what up? Oh, how about them Chiefs, right? Seriously, man. Hello, Mom. Hello, Dad. All of our fans watching, loyal followers, definitely love you guys. And those of you watching for the very first time, welcome to yet another episode of Sports at Night. I'm your host, as always, Todd Knight. And with me, we welcome back Will Michael Strahan, and our special guest, who you going to call? That's right, Bill Murray is here with us today. And I'm just going to really quickly going to go ahead and just jump in here. Zeke is going to be going ahead and starting for the Dallas Cowboys this Sunday against the New York Giants. And what's really interesting about that is we just learned on Friday that the suspension for all intents and purposes has been either pushed back to 2018, so he's going to be playing the entire year, or more specifically, he's not going to have to worry about the suspension at all at this point. I'm just going to go ahead and just say this, Bill. I need your thoughts on how much this impacts everything to do with the league, what it does with the Cowboys. You know, what do you have on that?
Well, one thing that I think it does, and my favorite part of this whole story, is it pretty much sends a message to Roger Goodell and the NFL that no, you cannot do anything you want as far as discipline goes. I think the NFL disciplinary system is a joke. Unfortunately, the Players Association agreed to this system back in December of 2014, so in a way they only have themselves to blame for it. Going forward, from a legal standpoint, if Zeke ever does have to face this suspension, it could be years from now. Because what will happen is once, the Players Association lawsuit goes through, that's going to take a year or two at least. Then it'll be, appealed to the next level. And then it could be appealed after that to the United States Supreme Court. So if he does face this suspension, it could be 5 or 6 years from now. So
the appeals process is a very long, very tedious ordeal that's going to happen here.
So there's no chance that he'll be suspended this year. He'll play the entire season. Like I said, if he does face suspension, it's going to be years from now. And I think, the Cowboys were still going to be a playoff team, in my opinion, regardless. But I think this gives them a much better chance at home field advantage throughout the playoffs.
That is very true. Will, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think the temporary restraining order that the judge approved was something that a lot of people thought that was going to happen because, if Zeke Elliott is not guilty of what he's being accused of, then your name is always going to be drugged through the mud with that. You're always going to be connected to domestic violence, whether you did it or not. And he's had many incidents that paints him in a bad light with the public and with the NFL, with pulling the lady's top down and punching the DJ. So I think this is kind of what needed to happen. And like Bill was saying, I think the NFL needed a power check. Our government runs on checks and balances. I think that the NBA and the MLB both have very structured discipline policies, and the NFL just kind of plays it on the fly as they go. And I saw a story where Josh Brown was retroactively suspended for 6 more games the night after Zeke Elliott's temporary restraining order was granted. So I thought that was kind of curious why the NFL seems to think that if you're a bigger star and if you're caught on camera, they need to lay the hammer down. And we have to remember, Roger Goodell works for the owners, and the owners feel that Jerry Jones's team gets favoritism because they're America's team. They're one of the biggest markets. They're just a powerhouse. As much as I hate to admit it, the Cowboys are a powerhouse in not only the NFL and all of sports. And so I think what we saw with Tom Brady and Deflategate and how he tried to fight it and ended up giving up on it, which we're talking about deflated footballs and domestic violence. It's not even the same area code.
Apples and oranges,
yes.
Completely.
But Tom Brady tried to fight it, and then he got granted the temporary restraining order, and so he got to play the whole year. Mm-hmm. And he tried to fight it in the offseason, and he decided that he would take the 4 games, and they ended up winning a Super Bowl. So it kind of worked out. But with Zeke Elliott, I don't think that he's going to get the suspension. But I think this is more of an indictment, not on the 6-game suspension, but on how the NFL regulates its punishments. And I think this would be the start of them changing it. And the new collective bargaining agreement, they bargained that in 2021. So if he pushes it far enough, they might have a solution to Roger Goodell before they have a solution to Ezekiel Elliott.
Which is really interesting when you consider it. And both of you actually covered everything a lot more in that aspect than what I was going to, which is great, because I'm obviously glad to have you guys on, because you can go through some of the more a little bit more of the legalities to go with that. I'm going to talk a little bit more as far as the impact that this has as far as the more immediate future is concerned. And this first game against the Giants, I do believe that Zeke will probably see between 20 and 25 snaps. I'm not saying he's going to have that many carries or that many touches, mind you, but as far as him being on the field for that amount of snaps, I do feel like that is something that's going to happen, because nobody really knows what kind of football shape he's in right now. This will force the Giants to respect the running game. No disrespect, obviously, to Darren McFadden or to Alfred Morris, but there is a tremendous difference impact-wise as well as talent is concerned whenever you compare Zeke versus either of those two, especially at this stage of their careers. And as far as the production goes, I'm going to go ahead and say that he probably gets about 70 to 90 yards on the ground, probably one TD as well. But I'm also going to kind of go into a different direction here. The NFL just recently had an unprecedented rate rather than going from 90 players to 75 to 53, they just straight up went from 90 to 53, right there from the get-go.
Right.
So with that, Will, who's the most surprising release that happened whenever this massive cut rate took place?
I know the popular choice here is TJ Ward, but I'm going to go with Joe Hayden. I was really surprised. Joe Hayden was their star on defense for, the Browns haven't been good for a long time, but they did, it was a few years back, they had 3 of their secondary players in the Pro Bowl. I mean, they had Dante Whitner, TJ Ward, and Joe Hayden. And I thought Joe Hayden, he's been injured, and he's been the victim of how many countless coaching changes and coordinator changes and just bad personnel on defense. You can only cover receivers for so long if you're not getting pressure. And the Browns have been a dumpster fire. I think they're heading in the right direction now. But cutting Joe Hayden was questionable to me because they traded for Brock Osweiler, one of the worst contracts maybe in NFL history.
I don't know. That Albert Hainsworth deal a few years ago was pretty damn bad.
Yeah, but Hainsworth played well for the Titans. Brock played 6 games.
That's a very good point. Yes,
and they were willing to release Osweiler and eat all that money, and they have the cap space because they're not paying anybody. They have all young draft picks because they've drafted a lot in the past few years.
They have,
and so they released Joe Hayden, who is better than most at corner. Better than your average cornerback, I would say. And he gets signed less than 24 hours later with the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah, he wasn't even on the mark for maybe like 2 or 3 hours,
right.
at most, which is absolutely crazy to think about.
Right.
Usually, you're waiting a day or 2, whatever.
Yeah, you want to fill out offers, but he just got picked right up.
Yeah.
And he could contribute to the Steelers winning the Super Bowl. Their secondary might be their weakest part on defense. They have a great linebacking core. Their defensive linemen are pretty good, and Joe Hayden might be, that piece that puts them over the top. I know they drafted a young guy, Artie Burns.
From University of Miami.
Right, and if you give Joe Hayden, who's been through it, to coach him up and teach him the ways, that's a pretty good starting cornerback tandem. It's not tops in the league, but it's pretty good. It's nothing like the Giants, right. But,
You have that mentorship going with that too, so that's definitely something to keep in mind with that. And as I had touched on in the very first episode, I picked Pittsburgh to go to the Super Bowl, and like Josh had mentioned in the previous episode, them getting somebody like a Joe Hayden that was their biggest problem whenever they played New England in the AFC title game, was not having any real key player at the back end of their defense. But I'm going to stick with the back end of the defense here, and you had mentioned TJ Ward as the popular choice. There's a reason why it's popular. I'm going to say it, but that's not really the reason. But still, him being released by Denver and then signing with Tampa Bay is definitely, I mean, Tampa was already going to be a team that was kind of on the rise as it is, but them having a real enforcer at the back end of that defense really kind of helps make that defense a little bit more of a threat, a little bit more legitimate. And while I do love what Elway has done since he became the GM of the Broncos, TJ has gone on to say, quote, that he feels like Elway could have handled the situation much more professionally. I don't know exactly what was said behind closed doors. Nobody really does. But this him being a former Pro Bowl safety brings some veteran leadership to a very young defense, and I think that that's really going to help Tampa as they're pushing forward going through the season. And them in Miami, I mean, they're going to have a very unique situation because of what Arma is currently doing. Them essentially having a bye week in week 1 and having to play weeks 2 through 17. I don't know of a time that's ever happened in NFL history. But Bill, who do you have as your surprise release, man?
Well, another note about Joe Hayden, he's going to step right in and start for the Steelers. And when you're a team who's been as bad as the Browns for as long as they've been bad, you shouldn't be cutting players who immediately go start for a contender in your own division. So I honestly, that was my biggest surprise. But another one that surprised me a lot, and I'll stick with the Steelers, was them cutting Niall Davis and Fitzgerald Toussaint. You know, after they lost D'Angelo Williams, you know, who was a great backup for Le'Veon Bell the last couple years. You know, he backed him up when Le'Veon got hurt, when he got suspended for smoking blunts with LeGarrette Blount. You know, D'Angelo Williams stepped right
nice
in.
Nice name
and,
play there, by
thanks.
the way.
You see what I did there?
Oh, yeah.
And they didn't miss a beat with D'Angelo Williams back there. But now that he's gone, you know, backup running back was really a position of concern for the Steelers. And what did they do? They cut their two most experienced backup running backs, and that's Fitzgerald Toussaint and Niall Davis. Toussaint, best remembered for fumbling against the Broncos in the playoffs. But what people forget is before that, he actually stepped in after Le'Veon got hurt before the playoffs. They probably wouldn't have made it to that point without him. Niall Davis, they just signed as a free agent. He was, one, supposed to be a veteran backup running back, two, a reliable return man, and they cut him before he even played a game. Now, I know they have James Conner, the rookie out of Pitt, who looked okay in the preseason, has a lot of potential. And then they've got Terrell Watson, a guy who spent time with the Bengals, Browns, and Broncos practice squads. So that's their running back depth chart after releasing, you know, their two most experienced running backs. So
the cover's pretty bare.
It is, yeah. I think that's you know, going to be a concern for them going forward. Is how could James Conner step in as a rookie and fill the shoes of Le'Veon Bell if something does happen to him this season?
And not only that, but if they decide to not sign him long term, do they feel confident with James Conner being the successor for Le'Veon? That's another thing to look at.
If the Steelers don't sign Le'Veon Bell, they got to give him what he wants. He's the best back in football. You know,
I agree.
David
He's
Johnson,
certainly one of the
fans
top three. I got to give him that.
Yes, I think he's the best. I think he's better than Zeke. I think he's better than David Johnson. He's just twitchy. He runs with the most patience. But with Niall Davis, I do have to say he was the Chiefs' backup, and he got cut. And he was with the Packers, who have the worst running back situation. They had to make one of their wide receivers run the ball, and he got cut. So I could see why they would cut Niall Davis, especially. I know he got cut with Green Bay because he liked to fumble. You know, if you can't hold on to the ball, you can't have a job in the NFL.
Yeah.
But I was surprised with Toussaint. I like Toussaint. So.
Yeah, and he is actually on the Steelers practice squad. I would not be surprised if, you know, another team, you know, teams can sign players off of other teams' practice squads. I would not be surprised if another team does it, even just to mess with the Steelers' heads,
Right.
add him as the third or fourth running back on your team. Sounds like a classic Bill Belichick move to sign him off the Steelers practice squad and then have him score a touchdown against the Steelers later this season.
I think, as we saw, his running back situation is more than okay in New England.
It's crowded, yeah.
In regards to the Patriots?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just going to point this out really, really quick. One of the biggest reasons why the Patriots lost to the Chiefs on Thursday was the fact that they don't have a guy like LeGarrette Blount anymore to be able to pick up a third and short, a fourth and short, and the Patriots were 0 for 2 on fourth down conversions.
I put that
basically
onus.
called the same play two times in a row in that exact same situation.
Yep.
And Kansas City knew it was coming. I mean,
They loaded up the box with their big guys, but the Patriots' offensive line played terrible. I mean, if you go back and look at the film, Tom Brady was not comfortable in the pocket, and they have a good pass rush. Justin Houston and D Ford they're really good. D Ford plugged in for Tamba Hali without skipping a beat, and Justin Houston's one of the top 3 pass rushers in the NFL in my opinion.
No question.
So, they're playing a really good, and Marcus Cannon was one of the best right tackles in the NFL last year, and he got whooped. And Tom Brady, you could tell it was affecting Tom Brady.
It was a very embarrassing thing what was going on with Cannon.
Right.
No question about that.
And Gronkowski caught the touchdown, in my opinion. Tom Brady should have had a touchdown pass, but neither here nor there.
We'll go into that later. With this being really the start of the NFL season and everything, and this being the second week for college football, I just got to ask, because we have yet to talk about college football in any degree since we started the show. But I'm going to change that up a little bit. I think it'd be a great idea to kind of dive into that a little bit. Bill, there's a lot of really, really good games that are slated, at least whenever you look at it on paper and the matchups and everything. What is the biggest college football game that you feel like is going to be going on today?
I mean, I think I've got to go LSU Chattanooga. No, I'm just kidding. I think the obvious choice is Oklahoma versus Ohio State. You've got 2 top 5 teams for the second week in a row. But, I think the loser of that game is still going to have a good chance at making the playoffs regardless, unless they just go out and look horrible. I don't think a non-conference loss against a top team really hurts that much. So I'm going to go...
So long as you perform well in the games that follow.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, if you lose this game and finish by running the table in your own conference, I think you've still got a good shot at the playoffs when you're in the conferences that these two teams are in. So I'm going to go with Stanford and USC.
Okay.
In my opinion, those are the 2 best teams in the Pac-12. I don't really believe in Washington that much. And I think that the winner of this game is going to be in the driver's seat going forward as far as winning the Pac-12 goes. Obviously, they could meet again in the conference championship game, but I think whoever wins this game is going to be in the driver's seat because I don't see the Pac-12 getting 2 playoff teams this year. I think they have a good chance at 1 if one of them could run the table. So I really think the winner of today's game has a good chance. USC was a lot of people's pick to make the playoffs. They came in ranked 4th. They did not look great last week against Western Michigan. And when you're tied with a directional Michigan team at halftime, that's usually not a good sign when you're ranked as highly as USC. Western Michigan had 263 rushing yards against them last week. And Stanford has a much better rushing attack. They've got a junior running back, Bryce Love, who I think is going to run all over them. And I like Stanford in this game, 34-28.
I like that. Okay. What about you, Will?
I am a huge Oklahoma Sooners fan. I live life according to Bob Stoops. So this is his replacement.
Words to
Lincoln
live by.
Riley's first big test. Last year, OU, played Ohio State in Norman, and they got embarrassed. It was not close. It looked bad, and it was just coming off of they were 1-2 after that game after losing to Houston and Greg Ward. And so I think this year they looked good against UTEP, but Baker Mayfield, he's been talking all week about how the Ohio State Buckeyes sung their fight song on their field and how it's been bothering him
Oh,
and bothering
gosh.
him and bothering him.
That would definitely
And they're playing
rub you the wrong way.
they're playing in Ohio State today. And I believe Baker's just one of those guys. He reminds me of Drew Brees. He really he runs around, he makes plays. He's more mobile than Drew, but Drew gets out of the pocket, especially back in his younger days. And he just makes things happen. And Baker's the same way. I mean, he's magical. And
that is remarkably high praise for somebody. I mean,
I think
Drew Brees is clearly a first ballot Hall of Famer.
Right. But coming out of college, he was a second round pick out of Purdue.
For sure, yeah.
And so I think that this year Oklahoma is going to be a lot more focused because last year a lot of people handed them what they thought was going to be an easy Big 12 title. And Oklahoma State is right there with them. Mason Rudolph is really good. And I think that, they lost Mixon, they lost P. Ryan, and they lost D.D. Westbrook. But their offensive line is one of the best, if not the best, in the entire country at any school.
Wow.
They return all 5 starters on the offensive line, and anchored by their left tackle, Orlando Brown Jr., whose nickname is Zeus. He is 6'8", 365 pounds.
All man,
pure pass-blocking man. And I think that Ohio State has one of the best defensive lines. So it's going to be really, really interesting to see strength on strength and see how the Sooners' offensive line stacks up against the number 2 team in the country. They're Ohio State's just awesome. But I do think Ohio State will edge them out because Urban Meyer's been there, done that for a long time, and Lincoln Riley is in his 30s. This is only his first big game. So I think what Bill said was correct, that whoever wins this game still has a shot. But if you remember last year, Oklahoma ran the table after losing to Ohio State and didn't get playoff consideration. I also want to point out that Penn State and Pitt will be an interesting game. Penn State ranked number 4. Pitt beat them last year. That's going to be a pretty good game.
I was actually looking at that game and kind of considering it whenever I was looking at the schedule. I'm just like, I want to go another direction here. A game that not as, it maybe in some people's eyes, getting kind of blown up a little too much. But I think it's going to be a really good matchup. 15th ranked Georgia at number 24th ranked Notre Dame. Nobody is. I mean, this is a game because of the Ohio State game and Oklahoma playing that's really kind of being overshadowed a little bit. But these two teams, last time they actually played each other was in 1981 to decide the national championship.
Wow.
So and that was back when Herschel Walker won the Heisman for Georgia. And speaking of great Georgia running backs, they've got Nick Chubb, who I really do believe is a late first round, early second round pick in this draft that's going to be coming up in April. I personally feel like he has a chance to be better than Todd Gurley whenever he gets to the pros because of the fact that he's going to be able to withstand more punishment because of his build and everything. And what Josh Adams did for Notre Dame, he ran for $160 against Temple last week. So both of these guys are very, very, very capable of carrying the load for each of their teams. For Georgia, Jacob Eason really showed a lot of promise as a freshman last year, but he's not playing, and nobody really knows exactly how much time he's going to miss with the leg injury that he suffered last week. So Jake Fromm actually gets his first start. He's a true freshman as well. So it's going to be the quarterbacking is going to be about who makes the fewest amount of mistakes. Because for Notre Dame, they also have Brandon Wimbush that's been Deshaun Kaiser's replacement for the Fighting Irish. So everything is going to come down to which quarterback can avoid making the big mistake as opposed to who's going to make the most big plays. That's what I really feel like it's going to come down to. And because of that, I'm actually going to go ahead and pick Georgia to win this game 24-20. That's what I think is going to happen.
One.
Yeah, for sure. We're going to stick on how the matchups are and everything.
Wait, before we go to that, I
Yes,
want
go
to
ahead.
say the second biggest matchup in my eyes is the Battle of the Bulldogs, Louisiana Tech versus Mississippi State today. Louisiana Tech's going to upset the SEC team.
LA Tech alumni, right?
That's right.
That would figure.
That's
okay.
right. Go Bulldogs.
Well, both of them are Bulldogs.
That's
so
right. Battle of the
You
Bulldogs.
can't go wrong with that. I mean, come on. We're going to stick on the same path here. Biggest NFL matchup, and Will, you're a bulldoggy kind of guy, so I'm just going to go ahead and toss it back to you on that. I'm going to give you a biscuit, throw you a bone. So, Will, who is your biggest NFL matchup that's coming up right now?
All right, guys. Now that we're back to the NFL, I have to interject here. I found a juicy bit of information that I wanted you guys.
Breaking news.
It's not breaking news, but it's pretty great, and I'm sure my man Will here is going to appreciate this. All right. The Patriots have lost 3 previous season openers during the Tom Brady era, right? 2001, 2003, and 2014. Guess what happened each of those seasons?
They won the Super Bowl.
They won the
They
Super Bowl.
won the Super Bowl.
That is,
I usually hate him, but that was good.
I don't know how much longer I'm going to be able to do this then. 'Cause
I'm about to go throw up.
I do feel a bit of regurgitation
Yeah.
Currently happening, and that
You
is.
can, I mean, some people do get sick in the face of greatness. I understand. I choose to embrace it. I choose to embrace Tom Brady for what he is, the GOAT. But that's neither here nor there.
I'll leave the embracing to Giselle.
Giselle.
Giselle,
Yes.
yeah, thank you.
Yes. I actually think that I couldn't decide. There's a lot of NFL matchups this week, and there are good ones. I mean, it's week 1. Everybody's excited. Tom Brady is already played, so I can't pick him even though they lost. But I actually think I have to go too. Giants and Cowboys. It's the battle for the NFC East, but we've beat that horse dead. I mean, Zeke Elliott's going to play. Giants have to stop him. Eli, I think will have a good game because their running game I don't think is going to be very good this year.
What is the status right now where Odell is concerned? Because I've been hearing that he's questionable, and everything is very 50-50 with that right now.
Well,
what is the latest on Odell Beckham?
Odell Beckham, Jordan Raanan, the beat reporter for ESPN, goes to every Giants practice. He says he's been running in straight lines, hasn't seen him do any cuts. But the team is saying he's close to 100%, but what people feel is the team doesn't want to play him, but Odell is pushing very hard to play. So I think that he's going to travel with the team. It's going to be a game-time decision. Mm-hmm. And if he does play, I think he could do okay because the Cowboys' defense is very young, very unproven. But I'm really excited to see Brandon Marshall. Brandon Marshall is usually very clutch. I mean, if he's not hurt, he's good. He's been good. I mean, he holds the record for receptions in a game with 21.
He's probably one of the most underappreciated receivers that's come into the league probably in the last 20 years, certainly at least.
And I do believe some of that is of his own doing because in his younger days with the Broncos and somewhat with the Dolphins, he was not a good teammate. Yeah. He didn't mesh with the locker room very well. But I think he knows what he wants. He loves New York. He had to get out of the Jet situation, but he's still in New York. His wife loves New York. I think he said that he's playing 2 more years and retiring regardless of what happens. So I think he'll be very motivated to get that ring. And
which has to excite you being a Giants fan.
absolutely. When we signed Brandon Marshall, we did it very early in the offseason. I think it was one of the first big free agent signings that happened. I was very excited. I said, even if he's not the Brandon Marshall of old, he's still very tall. He's still a very good red zone target, and he's a veteran. We have Sterling Shepard. Victor Cruz is gone, and that was the veteran presence. And I think that Sterling Shepard and Odell Beckham are both small, twitchy receivers, and you got to have some size. And so I was very happy with the signing of Brandon Marshall. Mm-hmm. But my other matchup is Green Bay and Seattle. This is going to be – this could be a preview of who's going to represent the NFC in the Super Bowl. And I think that
I disagree.
I think the Seahawks trading a number three wide receiver in Jermaine Kearse for Sheldon freaking Richardson to go along with Michael Bennett, Cliff Averill, and Frank Clark, as well as Jaron Reed from Alabama, along with Reuben, the veteran, and Malik McDowell, who they drafted out of Michigan State. That defensive line is going to be scary. And Green Bay, they lost 2 of their best offensive linemen last year.
That's a very good point.
But Aaron Rodgers' receiving core is one of the best in the league. He's got Marty Bennett.
It's irrelevant if you can't get
Adams.
protection, though.
That's very true. And I think the running game, I'm excited to see this defense versus offense. It's going to be fun, I believe.
Right. I'm going to go with the Titans and the Raiders. You have two franchise quarterbacks that are both coming off of broken legs with Marcus Mariota and Derek Carr. And both of these teams, this is a very, very under-the-radar matchup that both of these teams should be in the playoffs by the time it's all said and done. Whether they win their divisions or not, that's certainly open for debate.
Right.
But I do feel like both of those teams are extremely capable of being able to be in the playoffs. For Tennessee, it's going to be all about their ability to limit the possessions for Derek Carr, because that offense is certainly a force to be reckoned with.
That offensive line is so good.
Yeah.
It's so good.
I don't feel like they're quite as good as what Dallas's is.
Yeah, but Dallas
But
is...
my God. I mean, if you take away Dallas's offensive line,
it's Oakland.
then Oakland has the best.
It's either Oakland or Tennessee.
Yeah.
It's one of the two.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so you have the same kind of thing going there. But Tennessee, I feel like by limiting the possessions, they're built to do that, because they have that smash mouth style of offense that they run with that two-headed monster in DeMarco Murray, who I feel like had a hell of a comeback season last year after that absolute nightmarish debacle that took place in Philadelphia under Chip Kelly.
Terrible.
And then whenever you talk about Derrick Henry being there, him being in his second year to go along with that offensive line, Delaney Walker,
Eric Decker.
Yeah, Marcus Mariota has a lot of toys to play with.
He does.
That he did not really have to in his favor last year.
Right.
And plus, the Titans are better overall in their as far as their defensive personnel is concerned. Mm-hmm. And no disrespect to Oakland and their secondary, but it is an absolute joke.
It's bad.
And that is putting it very, very diplomatically.
Yes, that is a very polite answer.
Exactly. So it's for this reason that I feel like the Tennessee Titans will be victorious over the Oakland Raiders. And I'm going to say that it's going to be 27-17.
And I'm curious to see how Marshawn Lynch looks.
Yeah, he hasn't played football in a year.
Yeah, I think he's really going to be the key to how successful the Raiders are going to be this year. I mean, they had a lot of success last year with Latavius Murray, decided to let him go and go in a different direction with Lynch. But I think they're just kind of assuming Lynch is going to pick up from where he left off with the Seahawks, and I'm not so sure that's going to be the case.
I agree.
There's a lot of guys that, I mean,
he's 30.
He's obviously
32.
fresh, but he took a heck of a beating throughout his career.
Oh,
He
yeah.
did, but when he played for Seattle, it's very, very well known that they had one of the worst offensive lines to ever win a Super Bowl.
And now he has one of the best.
And now he has one of the best. So that could play into it too. And he's got two good backups. Jalen Richard and DeAndre Washington are two good backups.
Mm-hmm.
If he gets hurt, they can take their time. But I think Marshawn Lynch, he averaged 3.2 yards per carry in his last year. But again, running behind a Seahawks offensive line that was as bad as Oakland's is good.
For sure.
I would also go with Packers Seahawks. I think that those are two of the four best teams in the NFC. I would actually put them around the same level as the Falcons. I think the Cowboys are fourth. I'd put them a little lower than those three teams. But I think the Packers and Seahawks both have a lot of questions at running back, and that's what I'm interested in seeing in this game.
Ty Montgomery being a converted receiver to that
right,
position.
Yeah. Right. How is Ty Montgomery going to hold up over an entire season at running back? But with that passing game, how good is he going to have to be?
Right.
They've also got Jamal Williams, the backup running back, the rookie out of BYU. He's looked good. A lot of people are talking about him possibly supplanting Ty Montgomery down the road as the starting running back.
Should that mean Montgomery would move back to wide receiver?
I don't know. Who knows? They could use him, as kind of the X position, put him at running back. Who knows? Wildcat,
Oh, the Wildcat. Let's
Oh,
hope that doesn't
Lord.
make it come back.
Yeah. But the thing is, with the Packers passing game, I'm not sure how good the running back's going to have to be.
Right.
I think that it's going to be good enough. They're actually my pick to win the Super Bowl this year. The Seahawks, they've got Thomas Rawls, who's having some injury concerns. Then they've got Eddie Lacy, who looks like maybe he stayed away from the Chinese buffets a little more in the
McDonald's.
last year.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
McDonald's does not endorse this show. Just gonna
correct.
get
Not
that out of the way
a
right now.
sponsor
Yeah,
yet.
yeah.
But I'm not sure how much Eddie Lacy is going to help out. Then they've got CJ, Procise, who, he's supposedly this great pass catching running back, but he can't stay on the field. So I think both teams have a lot of questions at running back that could end up hurting them down the road. But I give the Packers the edge in this game. I think it's going to be 27-21 Packers.
Okay.
I've got a bold prediction to go along with the Seahawks. I think
Okay. Very, very quick. What you got?
I think that Chris Carson, the fourth string running back, will be starting for the Seahawks in the Super Bowl.
Wow.
Wow.
Okay. Last week we did the award picks, and I just want to ask, since neither of you guys, obviously, I mean, this is your first time here, and you were not able to be on the show last week. What are your just briefly kind of give me a rundown of who you feel like your award picks are going to be at the end of the season? I'm just going to really quick say I did not say my defensive rookie of the year. And I feel like it's going to be Lions linebacker Gerard Davis. There's a lot of guys that have been comparing him to the next Ray Lewis.
Wow.
And having seen him in the preseason against some pretty good opponents, he's a machine. I mean, he is in on seemingly every tackle. So I feel like that's something that Detroit definitely needs. They've sorely missed that. But I really do believe that he's going to be the defensive rookie of the year. Will, back to you.
All right, for my MVP, I'm picking Aaron Rodgers out of Green Bay. I think he is going to be on a tear. I think that, he's done a lot with a little, but this receiving core, I think he hasn't had a good tight end since Jermichael Finley.
And now he does.
You're right, and Marty Bennett is proven. I mean, he sat behind Jason Witten for 4 or 5 years, so the tread on his tires is not what it would be on a normal 31, 32-year-old. I believe that's how old he is.
Right.
Devontae Adams, a lot of touchdowns last year. I think he's only going to get better. I think Jordy Nelson is a mainstay in that offense. It's really not much to talk about. He's as good as advertised. Discount, double check, MVP. For breakout player of the year, I think Marcus Mariota is going to take the next step. And this was a choice between him and Jameis Winston. And I think I'm going to have to go with Mariota. Last year, if he doesn't break his leg, I don't think the Texans are in the playoffs. I think I think that the Titans would supplant them as the team in the AFC South.
Correct.
I wish we hadn't had to watch the Texans in the playoffs last year.
Right,
Oh,
who was it? Tom Savage starting?
Yes, yeah.
And Brock?
There's
Yeah.
a reason why they felt the innate need to go out and draft Deshaun Watson.
Right. But I think Mariota is going to take that next step. I think that he is going to prove to everybody, and I think Winston will take strides as well, but I think Mariota is going to put himself into at least the number 2 tier category this year. For my underachiever, I have to pick your boy, Dak Prescott.
Oh,
I
come
really
on.
think, and I'm not saying this because I'm a Cowboys hater. I just really think that what he did last year was fantastic. I give him all the credit in the world. This guy is from where we live. Everybody loves him, so there was no shortage of coverage here. We're in Cowboys country. But I just really think that what he did last year was more than anybody could have expected. And I think the expectations that have been heaped on him to follow that up, I think that he's going to fall short of what people think he's going to do. And so that's who I pick. My offensive player of the year, I'm going with Marcus Mariota. I think he'll throw 35 to 40 touchdowns.
Ooh.
And I think
Okay.
he'll rush for another 5. My defensive player of the year, I'm going to go with my boy, Landon Collins, the best safety in the NFL. Did you hear that? Cam Chancellor, the best. He is
Kind of hard to argue with that right now.
the best. In preseason, he looked like he was in midseason form. He played, I think, against, I can't remember, maybe the Patriots. He played 10 plays. He had 5 tackles and a sack. And for my Rookie of the Year, Kareem Hunt, Thursday's game. So
Yeah.
I called it, and I'm going to stick with him. Ride or die, Kareem Hunt.
Yeah. Bill?
All right, my MVP, I'm also going Aaron Rodgers for the same reasons that Will talked about. I think he's got one of his best supporting casts in years. I mean, Jordan Nelson, Devontae Adams, Randall Cobb is their third best wide receiver. I mean, that tells you all you need to know, I think. For my breakout player, I'm not sure if he qualifies, but I'm going with Martavis Bryant. He was out all last season on suspension. 2 years ago, he had 50 catches for 765 yards and 6 TDs. This year, I think he's going to be an absolute beast. I think he could approach 100 catches, over 1,000 yards. He's going to take a lot of attention away from Antonio Brown, give him a chance to have, a bounce-back season after last year, what was somewhat disappointing, at least from a fantasy football perspective.
1,200 yards is a disappointing season.
Yeah,
Antonio Brown.
It really is. That says all you need to know about downtown Antonio Brown. Underachiever, I don't think it's going to be fair, but I think the biggest underachiever is going to be considered Matthew Stafford because of that contract he just got.
Oh.
Yeah, and I still think he's going to have a
Give
good
Stafford
year.
some love, man.
I still think he's going to have 25 to 30 touchdowns, probably about 10 interceptions. I think the Lions are still going to be a playoff team, but because he's now the highest paid player in NFL history, he's going to be compared against the best quarterbacks in the league, the Tom Brady's, the Aaron Rodgers. I don't think he's going to live up to that, and he's just going to be viewed under an unfair microscope probably for the rest of his career because of this contract. So for that reason, I think he's going to be viewed as the biggest underachiever in the league. Offensive Player of the Year, I'm going to go with the homer pick, Le'Veon Bell. He wants to get paid. He doesn't want to have to work at Dairy Queen. So he's going to have a monstrous season. He's motivated. He's got the talent. I think he's going to be an absolute beast. He's going to flirt with MVP consideration this year. Defensive Player of the Year, I'm going to go J.J. Watt. He only played 3 games last year. He's coming off of an injury. I think if he stays healthy, if he's even in the conversation for Defensive Player of the Year, he's a media darling. I think they're going to give it to him if he gives them any reason to. So, especially after, all the help he's done with the hurricane, I think that they're going to want to reward him. If he gives them any reason to give him the award, they're going to do it. Rookie of the Year, I kind of feel like I'm cheating, but I'm going to go Kareem Hunt. If I had to go with the Defensive Rookie of the Year, I'm going to go with JJ's brother and another homer pick, TJ Watt, the rookie out of Wisconsin.
That's a good pick.
Yeah, I think, him and Ryan Shazier, if he can stay healthy, are going to give, opposing offenses nightmares. We're going to have to focus on Shazier's speed, which I think is going to allow TJ Watt to put up pretty big numbers his rookie year. So those are my picks.
You still have to deal with the ageless wonder, James Harrison.
That's right. And TJ actually won the job over James Harrison last week. So, and James Harrison said, okay. So he's fine with it.
Okay.
So,
Well, speaking of, I'm going to go back to what you were kind of saying a little bit about Kareem Hunt, and I got to throw you a bone on this one because you had called for Kareem Hunt.
Nailed it.
In fantasy football. So obviously, I think you might know what you're talking about a little bit. So I'm just gonna kick it off to you here for this part.
I gotta say,
really quick, man.
It didn't get out to a
Starters
good
and sitters.
start. It didn't get out to a good start. He fumbled on his first carry
Very
of his
true.
career. But I'm going to go through this real quick. Starters, I think Jared Goff at the Colts. I know a lot of people like to make Jared Goff the butt of every joke, but the Colts are a bad defense, and they're playing without their best defensive player, Vontae Davis. Sean McVay is not Jeff Fisher. I don't think anybody is Jeff Fisher, except for maybe Captain Shreve. They run the same offense, but
That's a local high school here, by the way.
I think I really think that Goff is going to take a step forward. He's not going to be great, but playing against that defense, I think he'll be serviceable. He has Cooper Kupp, who they have developed great chemistry amid all the reports in training camp, and Sammy Watkins, who, if we remember, got drafted before Odell Beckham Jr. So, they're still – I mean, if he can stay healthy, Sammy Watkins is a good wide receiver. For running back, Rob Kelly versus the Eagles. Fat Rob is one of my favorite running backs in the NFL. If your nickname is Fat because you're a big guy and you're running the ball that well, I love you. So that's all I'm going to say about him. Wide receiver, Zay Jones from Buffalo. I love this kid. I mean, he's part of the reason they traded Sammy Watkins to the Rams. The Bills are going to be a dumpster fire, mind you. They're going to be terrible. They're tanking. They're trying to get a quarterback to replace Tyrod Taylor. That's why they didn't want to pay him. And I think Zay Jones is their number one option. Even with Jordan Matthews healthy, Jordan Matthews is a slot receiver, Zay Jones is outside, and the Jets are the worst. They're going to be the worst team, maybe of all time. They're awful. And tight end, Austin Hooper versus the Bears. Fantastic offense. I think he's going to be the number 3. People are not going to think about him. I think he's going to get a lot of looks. Sit him. I think you should sit Eli Manning, as much as I'd hate to say it. He has this thing when he plays the Cowboys, he either plays fantastic or he just plays bad, and I think that offensive line is too shaky. And I think that, he might have 3 or 4 touchdowns, but he also might have 2 picks, and he might only have 250 yards. Running back, Adrian Peterson versus the Vikings. I think that the Saints –
That sounds weird to say.
I know, but I think the Saints' backfield is as crowded as it's ever been. Their Super Bowl, they had Pierre Thomas, Reggie Bush, who was the other one? Anyway, they've always had a lot of running backs. Alvin Kamara will take that Darren Sproles, Reggie Bush, catch the ball, catch screen passes out of the backfield. And Mark Ingram is very good, I think. So I think Adrian Peterson will be limited. T.Y. Hilton versus the Rams. Scott Tolzien's throwing to him. That's all I'm going to say about that. And Jason Witten versus the Giants. He's 180 years old, and he's slowing down. I think this will be his last year, and I think this is where we really start to see his age this year.
All right. Well, it's interesting you mentioned about the whole tanking thing in regards to the Bills. I'm going to shift gears a little bit here and talk a little bit about a meeting that's about to take place regarding the NBA draft lottery. And there's a lot of talk about it being reformatted to help kind of discourage the whole tanking concept a little bit. And Will, I just want to ask you what you feel like is going to happen. What do you think on this? Just kind of quickly tell me what your thoughts are.
Well, I think Adam Silver is the best commissioner in all of professional sports. He's been very proactive. He's been on the forefront of a lot of things. As reactive as the NFL and Roger Goodell are, Adam Silver is the complete opposite. I think that this is long overdue, and I think, no offense to you, Bill, but I think the direct reason that they are doing this is because of the Sixers. I
agree.
They have been so bad for so long that it's time for them to be good, and you don't want the Knicks and the Lakers to do the same thing because those are 2 marquee markets that you want people to watch. The Knicks have the highest ticket sales every year, and they're terrible. Jimmy Dolan's the worst owner in sports besides Dan Gilbert. And so I think that that and the punishment that they're going to delve out are possible punishments for resting, stars during primetime games. I think that'll do more to shift the NBA to what they want to be. And I think you see the NBA is making great leaps and bounds. Look at the contracts players are getting. Look at the TV money that they're getting. I think the NBA is going in the right direction, and I think this will do nothing but help.
Okay. Bill, you being a Sixers fan, I know this hits very, very close to home with you.
It does.
What do you feel on this?
And this may be a surprise to y'all, but I really think the system is horrible. It incentivizes teams to lose. Now, I do give the 76ers credit for taking advantage of a horrible system, and I'm proud that, my favorite team is going to be the catalyst for change, because I don't want to see teams doing this. I've lived through the process. Hopefully, the process is over now and the Sixers are going to make the playoffs this year, but I don't want to see other teams doing it. As a fan, it was painful to sit through. for half a season watching player development, watching these random guys from the D-League come in and just kind of throwing everyone against a wall and seeing who sticks. It's entertaining for a while, but at some point you get sick of losing. I mean, when you're only winning, 10 games in a season, it's painful. It's
When
bad
there's
for the
82 of
fans.
them, yeah.
Exactly. And then, when you see teams late in the season resting star players, and I know this is a little, touches on emotions, but when you picture a dad taking his son to a game to see his favorite players, only to find out, oh, sorry, son, your favorite players aren't playing because they're trying to lose. I mean, that's not good for anyone. It's not good for fans. It's not good for the league. So I'm all in favor of changing the system. The only thing that I would recommend, I think that they should give teams more notice than one season. They should say, okay, in 2020 or 2019, here's what we're going to start doing. We're changing the NBA draft lottery process. Give them some time to prepare, because some teams have already been relying on this bad system. And like the Suns, for example, they benched one of their best point guards last season to, they had no incentive to win. They were trying to lose and tank, get a better draft pick. You don't want to punish teams who have been relying on this system for the last couple years. So give them 2 or 3 years advance notice before you change the system. But I'm all in favor of changing the system. I think it's broken. I think it's bad for everyone. So I'm happy that they're discussing changes. And I agree. I think Adam Silver is the best commissioner in the league. I think he's much better than David Stern, and I'm also a big fan.
I think, okay, we all unanimously agree on Adam Silver. Certainly much better than what Goodell is. While I feel like in regards to all this going on with the NBA draft lottery and it being possibly affected by everything here, the process can be appreciated when it works. But my God, is it terrible when it's in the works. I mean, it's absolute torture for fans to sit there and witness these no-name players that really don't have much of a chance to make a name for themselves playing against the top-tier talents like the LeBrons, like the Kawhi Leonards, and, Anthony Davises. I mean, I could go down the list on and on and on and on and on. But professional teams are paid to win. The owners and the GMs, they are responsible for putting the best product available on the court. End of story on that. The Sixers are the best recent example of this. Bill, I know you're a Sixers fan, so you can relate to that. However, I do feel like they could challenge for a playoff spot this year based on what they've done in recent years in the draft. The committee is getting together later this month to vote to make something happen where the NBA draft can be much more fairly organized so that teams are discouraged from the tanking concept. One idea that is actually being proposed right now, no team can draft in the top 3 in consecutive years. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on with that. One of the biggest things that I would mention in regards to that, this didn't really happen so much by them doing terrible or anything, but my favorite example is the Orlando Magic back in the early 90s. Whenever they drafted Shaq, number 1 overall in 92, and then in 93, they had gotten very, very, very lucky in the ping pong ball bounced their way and everything. Of course, they drafted Chris Webber and ransomed him over to the Warriors to get Anthony Penny Hardaway, one of my favorite players of all time. Woo! Does not get the kind of credit he deserves. Y'all should go check him out. But there needs to be a reduction in the temptation to sit key players in these nationally televised games, just like what you were talking about. The NBA preseason is nearing, and the offseason could be restructured completely with this meeting. But guys, that's all the time that we have today. As always,
before we
go ahead, real quick.
I have a this day in sports history
Okay.
for you. It's not as good as last week's, but on this day in history, Randy Johnson reached 300 strikeouts for the 5th consecutive season to set the record.
Man,
Wow.
that's pretty good.
And in
big
1965, Sandy Koufax threw his 4th career perfect game against the Cubs.
Wow.
Yes.
Great way to end off the show. I mean, seriously, as always, I'm your host, Todd Knight. With me, Bill Murray, Will Michael Strahan. Real fans, real talk. So long, everybody.